I told people before, I have like a 45-minute life. That's not hooked up.
All right, we're back and we're talking about the pipeline. And again, we're talking about tracking where your leads are coming from. Obviously, if it's an office lead or if it's an Op-City lead, either one, it's going to create the referral fee in the spreadsheet, and it's going to take that out. If it's it's a paid lead that you developed, or a Zillow lead that you're paying for, or a referral of any sort, then it's going to leave the numbers the same, but you want to track those because you want to know how many referrals you get and how many paid leads you're getting, and kind of start to track exactly what your cost per closing is and your cost per lead as well. So all these sections are pretty much built so that you probably won't need any more sections or any more rows. If you get to the point where you need more rows, we can show you how to add more rows. But this will typically cover most of you until you reach the $150,000 to $200,000 point on gross commission earnings. So the under agreement, we talked about that. We're getting credit for 75% of our under agreements in our pipeline. We're also, and it's up to you how deep you want to go with this. Most of our agents will put the phone number, the email, and the source in there, as well as the rest of the information. You could just leave it as 123 Main Street, John Smith, whatever, if you want to just go looking up their information somewhere else. I'm not going to make you fill out or ask you to fill out the phone number. I will ask you the town and the source where that came from, but the email and the phone number, that's up to you. Some agents like it because they know they can look at their pipeline, and like that, they can pick up the phone and start calling people in their prospective and just work down through their prospective list and work through their active list and then move on with their day. So if that's going to be easier for you, I would definitely, it'll be much faster if you enter in that information. And if you're entering people into perspective, you're going to be following up with them for a while, maybe until they buy something or move on. So it probably makes sense to get their information in there up front. Under agreements, you're getting 75% close rate on. Now that we move under active listings, we've built it based on a 33% close rate. It basically says 1 out of every 3 listings you take will close. You can adjust those numbers, and we can adjust those numbers if you start closing more. If you're really focused on only taking listings that are going to sell, we'll change that number. It's probably more like 66 or 75% if you're really just focused on taking listings that sell. I'm fortunate enough to get a few bank owns here and there. Those are pretty much a guaranteed sell if I just have them long enough. Sometimes they way overprice them, and it takes me 6 months to sell a bank owned listing, but I typically don't lose those unless I've done something stupid. So I can take a higher percentage on those. So it depends on what your closing rate is for listings. We can look at that as you go, but for now, leave it alone. Just plan on, hey, 1 out of 3 listings I take will close. All you have to do is enter the different price ranges in of what you think it's going to sell for. If you've taken a different percentage than the 2.25%, then you can change that number. Just put in a 3 or whatever you want to put in for whatever you've negotiated. Hopefully you're negotiating 3 on your list sides. We'll talk about that as we go as well. And obviously up here under close and an agreement, you're going to know exactly what you're going to be earning. So you can change the percentages. I wouldn't mess with any of the formulas. The formulas are pretty much all set. The other important category over here is on the far right-hand side is the notes. Making sure you're keeping notes, because your notes can be just something quick like, spoke to this person, they're thinking about buying the next 3 to 6 months. They said follow up in 3 months. If you don't keep good notes, you're not going to remember. Once you get enough people in here, you're going to be like, I don't remember who they were. There's even occasionally now that I'll get a call from people that I'm like, I don't remember who this was. It'll be some lead that, requested information on one of my listings maybe a while back. And I'll be the first to admit that sometimes I'm probably the biggest breaker of the rules when it comes to using this pipeline. I've tried to make myself more focused on looking at this every day. And it is helping me with my business, because there's one particular listing, for instance, that's 63 Sunrise. I've had it forever. It's in Grafton. It started way too high on price. I had interest early. I had a few buyer leads that came from just calling me on my listing sign, and I followed up with them, and it hasn't produced anything yet. But at least I have them in a perspective, and they said, hey, I'm interested in that property, but not at that price. If you don't keep their information somewhere, I guarantee you're going to forget them. So maybe they're not going in your sink, because you don't have an email address for them, and they just called and they really didn't want you to go into the whole, let me send you listing alert thing. But you get their phone number, you got their name, they were interested in 63 Sunrise. Keep their information. Maybe you have another listing that comes up in the future that would work for them. So if you have a name and at least a valid phone number or a valid phone number and email, they're someone you want to probably follow up with as long as they had realistic goals. There was someone I talked to last week that had me on the phone for like 45 minutes, and by the time I was done, I figured out that she was basically looking for every property in Massachusetts, as long as she felt it when she was there. So I don't know how you help someone like that buy a house, but anything from $200,000 to $2 million could be a piece of land, could be a house, could be a farm, could be a waterfront condo in Boston. It could be on a lake in Western Mass. As long as it artistically feels right, that's what they were looking for. So, those probably wouldn't go in your perspective. Sometimes you got to make business decisions that this just isn't worth following up on. But let's get back to the ratios. Active listings are getting a 33% close rate. You don't have to worry about these percentages all in here, and everything automatically calculates. All you have to worry about is the rows and getting your clients in here and getting the price range in here and where this lead is coming from. On the active buyers, you're getting a 20% closing ratio on it. That means if you have 5 today, you hopefully will close more than 1 out of 5. But the averages say that in this low inventory market, if you're working with 5, you probably shouldn't be counting on more than 1 of those closing, maybe 2. If your numbers prove that you can close 2, then at some point we change the pipeline and change because of the way you're converting, the type of leads you're converting, that you're able to do 2 out of 5 or 3 out of 5. We'll change those percentages, but for now, again, plan on worst case scenario that I'm gonna have to work on 5 buyer leads to get 1 to close. And it's just a good way to look at it. And if you can move them up to under agreement, you just move from 20% to 75%. So that's the goal. The goal is to get them in here, move them up, get them closed, and that's when you actually earn the money. Perspective, this category right here, basically anybody, again, you've had a phone conversation with, you've had a text conversation, you've had some kind of conversation about real estate, maybe even face-to-face, and then you're going to follow up with them. Those are getting a 10% weighted score on it. We've entered all the commissions in there as 2.25% because you don't know if you're going to get 2.5, you're going to get 2. If you have a bunch of them and they're all in the middle, then 2.25 is a safe number to kind of go with to have a starting point. If you've contracted with them and you're contracted with them for 2.5, you can change that line to 2.5 if you want. But probably a prospective is not someone you've signed a contract with. If you've signed a contract with them, they're probably moved to active at this point. Sometimes people will move back and forth too. You have to understand that. And if you're moving people back and forth, all you have to do is highlight basically everything over to the price range, and then copy it, and then move it down here and paste it, and it'll move it all down, and then you just want to delete out who you moved from active to prospective. So if somebody all of a sudden Tim decided, he was active out looking at properties, now he's going to put it on the back burner for a while. He's going to wait 6 to 9 months and decide to buy then. Then sometimes you're going to have people moving up and down, but that's pretty easy to move them around. So you're getting 10%. That means 1 out of 10. That means if you've had 10 conversations with people and you're following up with them, you should be close at least 1 out of 10. Hopefully 2 out of 10. But again, we don't want to overestimate your closing ratios until you've proven your skill sets. If you prove to be better at your closing your listings and closing your buyers, then we'll change the numbers then. And then in 6 months from now, you got different ratios. But for now, leave it the way it is.
So if you have somebody that's going to list and I was sitting back there so I couldn't see, but if you have somebody that's going to list their house, they're not ready yet, they're getting ready, it's no contract signed, where are you entering them into?
I would still probably act them into active listings because you're only giving yourself 33% close ratio on those. You're basically saying if I had 3 of those, I would definitely list and sell 1 of those. That would be your choice. Would be either put them in active 20% or active I'll put them in the active listings and just say, I just put a note on here, going to be listing. You know what I mean? So that's probably where I put them. 33% is probably a good place for those. Does that help? All right. So then perspective from there, you're basically all your categories are adding over and adding down automatically. These are all automatically created down here at the bottom. You have your closed, that's the money you've earned. You have your under agreement, your listed, your active, and your perspective. They all add down, but they also take into consideration if you took any Opcity referrals and you put your one in that category, then it's calculating in your referral fees and your adjusted net before your splits. So that would be this number. The gross, this actually moves over to here and says basically after referral fees, based on what I put into my pipeline so far, I've got 9,800 that's coming to me that I can expect to earn off this if I keep working it. If you stop working at all, then obviously it's probably going to be less. But if you keep working it the way you should, this is what you should expect out of what you've entered into your pipeline so far. It then calculates a split to the office and gives you basically categories for advertising, vacation, rainy day money, charity, what you want to give to charity, and other expenses. So in here, you should be entering, what's your budget right now? If your budget right now for vacation, rainy day is 0 because you're committed to growing your business, then you leave that 0 for now. If you say, yeah, I just need to go on vacation once a year, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, I'll go out of my mind and I'll shoot somebody, then you want to put in a number there. Might be $1,000 this year. Might be $500 for a night, just a night away, but put something in there. If you are going to set charity aside for now, you're going to donate your time instead of your money, then you put 0 in, but you might want to build it up at some point. Other expenses would be your hard costs of being an agent, the realtor fees, your MLS fees, a few signs, some business cards. You know, for most agents, it's at least $1,500. I'd probably say $2,000 is a safe number. But the reason you start adding these things in here is because some agents sometimes just look at, oh, this is my gross. This is the number I'm going to make. And they don't really take into account that, yeah, there's an office split. I got to put some money aside for marketing because if I don't, I'm not going to be growing my business, or I'm constantly going to be working my tail off and not having no time for my family because I'm closing business and I'm just knocking on doors or making 1,000 calls. Over time, some of you are going to have to put in a lot of work up front to get to where you want to go faster. But over time, the goal is to get your money working for you so that when you're off and you're enjoying a day at the beach, your money's working for you. Your money is producing leads. Your money is getting the pipeline going and keeping you fed so that you can take a little time off, so that you can take a weekend off, that you're not just constantly in the grind forever. You know, if you have to grind for the next 6 months to a year to get to where you want to be so that you finally have a budget of what you need to produce the kind of income that you want, then we're going to do that. But over time, you want to set some money aside for the different things that will allow you to be, you know, happy and living a good life. So that's what our current is. That's one of the things we need to focus on. But the other part we need to focus on is our goal. What is our goal so that we know, are we getting closer? Are we miles away? Are we starting to get there? Are we growing it consistently? And the baseline goal I put in here, and you can change these if you want to, depending on your goals. If your goals are higher or lower, I mean, at the end of the day, it's not our goals. It's got to be your goals. It doesn't matter to us really at the Lux Group if you make 80,000 or 150, because once you hit 80, you're going to cap. No matter what split package you're on, you're going to cap here, and we're not making any more money on you the rest of the year. So this is about your goals. This is, you know, we want to help you get to where you want to go, but at the end of the day, this is whatever your goals are. It's not about us at that point in time. So it's really never about us. Our goal is to help you guys be happy, and you know, and if you're happy, we're happy. So the gross income would be the gross. You can enter in that whatever you want. You have to look at this formula, and if you're in this area, you're probably looking at like $5,000 per commission deal. That's kind of your average commission coming in. If you're in the Boston area, it's probably more like 8 to 10. So I would come up here and change this number to 8,000. And that's basically taking the 150 and dividing it by how many deals you need to do. I'm just going to change this back to 5 because that was where I wanted to show it. So if your gross commission goal is 150,000 and you're averaging $5,000 a commission, it's going to take 30 deals to get that done. Your office split, obviously, if you're doing that many deals, you're going to cap. So instead of having a formula here, we just entered in the cap, whatever your cap is. Because once you're there, you're capping no matter what. So we don't have to do it at times 0.2 or 0.25 or anything like that, because you know you're always capping when you're hitting that kind of goal. Your ad budget is basically automatically calculating. And right now it's calculating based on, it's saying that I want 80% of my business to come from advertising. The other 20% should happen by referrals. It should happen by me working open houses, some of my effort and time and energy. If you want to do it based on 100%, then we would change this. We'd take the 0.8 out of here. But for purposes of starting somewhere, I would say, let's plan on getting you to the point where you're spending enough advertising money that 80% of your goal is going to be accomplished by your advertising. And to do that, you're basically, what we're saying is that our income goal, 150,000 times 80%, 0.8, times $750 to secure a buyer. The averages out in the industry are anywhere from $600 to $1,000, basically. If you spend that kind of money, you work it the way you should be, it should cost you about this much money to generate a sale. And I've seen the numbers prove out. You know, it's not as many leads if it's Zillow or Real.com, because those leads are more expensive, but they're further along in the process. If it's Facebook leads that you're capturing for $5 to $10 a lead, it's just going to take more of them because they're usually not as far along in the buying process. But let's use 750 for now. If your numbers change and we start tracking your numbers and your cost per deal is less or more, then we'll change that number so that we know where you're at. So for argument's sake, we're saying it's going to cost us $750 per closing to secure a buyer. When you look at it from a perspective of what is OpCity charging you, they're charging you 35%. So if you're averaging a $5,000 commission, they're charging you, let's see, $2,250. And it's costing them probably $700, roughly, which is about 15% of your gross commission. And they're charging you 35%. So that difference is about 20 to 25%. After they pay their people to work those leads, they're probably netting between 10 and 15% profit. So at the end of the day, people look at it like 35%. That's huge. That's costly. For you to generate your own business, it's going to cost you 15 to 20%. So the question becomes, do I want to take back that 15% that I'm paying OpCity in profit, or, you know, and eventually get my own lead generation going so that I get my own branding going as well? Because when you're advertising yourself too, you have to look at it from a perspective of, I'm getting leads, but I'm also getting branding of myself in a community that I'm looking to work. So it does have added value that may not come back to you over time, but there's a reason OpCity is charging 35%. They're a for-profit company. They're making 15 to 20%, and it's costing them 15 to 20%. So you just have to understand that. So basically, that calculation says that we need to spend $18,000 to gross $150,000. Most of us don't have $18,000 set aside for advertising. I would say if you had $9,000 setting aside for advertising right now, you'd be well on your way, because you'd have, by the time you got to the 6-month point of spending roughly $900 a month, you'd probably start having some good closings, and you'd be able to replenish that $9,000 that you started out with. But most of us don't have that kind of money and set aside, so we have to work up to that and get there over time. But we want to look at what would happen if I did have this kind of money right now. So if I had a goal of $150,000 and I paid my cap, you know, after my cap, I pay I put 18,000 towards advertising. I put 5,000 towards my vacation rainy day fund. And vacation rainy day fund is most of us don't even save enough, put enough money aside if the washing machine or the refrigerator breaks down. Where's that money coming from? Or God forbid, worst case scenario, furnace quits and you have to place a $6,000 furnace. So setting money aside is important. Money for charity, if charity is important to you, your other expenses, and then you have basically your pre-tax. We've even got a line in here for estimated taxes, which we're just basically saying is roughly 25% of your pre-tax money. Depending on your write-offs, it could be a little bit more, it could be a little less. That's up to you. But it's basically what the goal of this is, to give you an idea of what is your net after tax on this kind of business, and then what are you left with after your taxes? What are you left with? What are you left with to spend on your mortgage, to spend on your cars, to spend on everything else? That's the number. $150,000 business. I don't think your numbers would be much different than that. So you have to decide, is that where I want my goal to be? Do I want it to be more? Do I want it to be less? That's up to you. But don't think that these numbers are going to be a whole lot different. Maybe you don't want to say, maybe you want to, this number scares you down here. So you say, I want to see it and I'll just spend my vacation money afterwards. But I personally think you should be putting money aside for vacations and having some fun. Probably want to, with the charity, you have some tax write-offs. So be thinking about those things. That line, your goals, basically then looks at what you're currently at. And all these numbers in the currently column, those are automatically fed over from over on the right-hand side. And then it basically shows you what your shortage or overage is. So if it's a negative number, it's overage. If it's positive number like these, that means you're short. Right now, your pipeline's showing you're short $140,000. So you've got some work to do on filling in the pipeline. And that's where your work is filling out the pipeline and getting it to the point where your pipeline is in support of your business goals. Does that make sense? There's not a lot of formulas you have to do in here. You just have to make sure you're entering in the boxes that don't have formulas. If you click on a box and it has a formula that's showing up here in this bar right here, don't mess with it, or try not to, or ask me if you have any questions, or we can look at it outside of these meetings and make sure that yours is set up the way you want it. The bottom part of this is going to be very important for us to track how many leads you're getting from the different sources and what is your cost per closing. So we're going to use Sync to look at how many leads have you gotten from office leads accepted. And you see, right, the deals expected over here. These are automatically entered in based on the averages above. So for instance, if you're doing your own 5 Street and Zillow leads and you've gotten 30 leads from them, and right now we've got nothing in our pipeline that shows that it's a possible Zillow lead. So we know that it's cost us $300 for those 30 leads. The cost per lead is 10, but we've got nothing in potential for that expenditure. That's a problem. But if we move this up to, we've gotten 30 leads from Facebook, and we've spent $100 on Facebook. Our cost per lead is $3, and we've got one expected closing that's coming from that. Our cost per deal is $100. That would be friggin' fantastic if that happened. So these are automatically calculated over, because basically they're taking into consideration where that lead came from. And I don't know if, because, for instance, the prospective is only getting a 10% close rate, you're also only getting a tenth of a expected closing result from that office lead line. Does that make sense? So it's basically saying you can't expect, you're not going to overestimate the expected deals you've gotten from your paid lead sources. So if this number had this number could be like 3.3, meaning all the averages above are saying if you keep working those paid leads, you're going to get 3.3 closings, because it's taking in the law of the averages of the 75% for under agreement, the 33% for active listings, the 20% for active buyers, and the 10% prospective leads. So if you had 10 prospective leads in there under my paid lead sources, then that would give you a 1 down here for expected deals. And you can see this formula is adding up a bunch of columns. And it's basically taking in all those leads that you put in there and said, these were my paid leads, or these were Zillow leads. It's adding them all up and giving them the appropriate percentage times 0.2, times 0.1, times 0.75, so that you're looking at it realistically and saying, all right, I've spent $300 on Zillow and Real.com, and I've got 1.5 expected closings from it, which would mean I would earn roughly this divided by the number of the dollars spent, and that is how much I would make. So if I, for instance, let me throw one into closed here. If I change this closed into, we've got it in there as a paid lead source. Let me throw in as a Zillow lead source. And I put this one in as under the agreement, I'll put that one in as a Zillow lead as well. So now if I go to the very bottom, we'll see that number changed to 2. So it's saying I've got 2 expected closings, and actually one of the things I have to do. Oh, there we go. So it was rounding it up, but it's basically saying I got 1 closed and 1 under agreement. So I'm only getting 75% of the credit for the second one. And it's basically I've spent $300. My cost per lead is $10. My cost per closing is only $171 because I've got almost 2 closings for that $300 spent. Does that make sense? It's basically giving you what your cost per deal is. And that's the most important number. If that number is $700, $800, that's pretty good. If it's $600, $500, that's great. If it's $1,200, we got to be concerned. If it's $1,500, then I'd really be concerned. Doesn't mean it's still not a good expenditure. Would you, if I told you you could spend $1,500 and double your money in the next 6 months, would that sound like a pretty good investment? It's still a pretty good investment, but the industry averages say you shouldn't have to spend $1,500 to get a closing. Because if you're spending $1,500 closing, you might as well pay just Opcity and not put your money at risk. The goal of this is to make sure you're getting a better investment investing in yourself than just letting Opcity invest their money for you and making more money off you. So that's the goal, is to use this to basically track where we're at, where we're going. We also have a section in here that has an advertising ramp up. And if your current spend is $200 a month, and from this above a calculation, it basically says to get to your goal, you're going to have to spend $1,500 a month. It basically is telling you that you're $1,300 short every month of your goal of what you need to spend per month on your advertising. If you want to make it up in the next 4 closings to fund it for a solid 6 months so that you can get ahead of the game, then for your per closing, the next 3 closings, you got to put $2,000 towards your marketing. If any of you listened to that webinar I posted a while back about the agent that grew a team massively in 4 years, early on, she was investing 50% of every commission dollar she earned back into her advertising for probably, my guess is, at least a couple years. So she was willing to live on food stamps, so to speak, until she was where she wanted to go. That's how she got there. Now most people would love to have her income. She was willing to live pretty efficiently for a while to get to where she wanted to go. So this will just kind of give you an idea of how much you would have to reinvest in yourself in the next 4 closings that you have to get to where you want to go faster. If you wanted to change this to 6 months, you can. You just basically come in here and change the 4 to a 6. That would basically tell you that for the next 6 closings, let's see, times 6 divided by 6. So that would be 26% of every closing for your next 6 closings you would have to invest to get to where you want to go. So you're not just going to jump from A to B. It just goes to show you that unless you have a cash hoard sitting in your bank account right now, you're going to have to start square one and just figure out every closing. What am I putting back to get to a higher spend per month? Where am I spending that money? What's the proof in the pudding, so to speak, of what is it doing for me? What am I getting for a return? It'll also show you where is my best money spent. If you're really good at, some people are really good at the Facebook ads and the conversions with those. If you're really good at those, I would say you're probably going to see your best cost per closing come out of that. The harder part with that is if you think about the nature of the buying cycle, Real.com and Zillow are getting people onto their websites and they're keeping them there. And they're getting to come back with their advertising. They keep people coming back and back and back. And eventually they see a property and what do? They request information on the property. And that's where they're selling it to you. They're saying, all right, if you want access to these leads, it's going to cost you roughly probably $40 to $50 a lead on average. I don't know if any of you are getting any cheaper than that, but maybe 25 in some zip codes, but you're going to pay a decent amount of money for those leads. But they're further along in the process. A lot of agents like those because they're more looking for, hey, I need something quick, or I don't want to follow up with these people for a year. If you're attracting people through Facebook and through Google and stuff like that, they tend to be on the longer cycle. They tend to be much cheaper, $5 to $10 a lead, and but the numbers aren't going to change. You need just as many. You need more. You need 3 or 4 times more of those leads to produce the same results of a Real.com and a Zillow. So if you're good at the long-term game and making sure they're in sync and they're set up with listing alerts and they're getting your drip campaigns and you're reaching out every once in a while and you want a lot of leads to call, you would lean your money probably towards Facebook and those kind of advertising methods because you'll have a lot more people on your website. The other thing I like about mixing some of that in too is that's your own personal branding. Those are ads that are being driven from your business page. More people are seeing those. Zillow and Real.com, Zillow, they do see you on the bottom of the page. Real.com, they don't have a clue who you are. They don't even know why you exist when you call them from a Real.com lead because they're just on Real.com looking. They request information. And with the shared, they're sending it to 3 or 4 agents. With the unshared, they're sending it to you. But you're making that call, and they're like, "Who?" But so that's pretty much it on the pipeline. Any questions on that? Really, just need to get in and start using it. Start punching in what you do have for leads, punching in your goals, and starting to track it and get a feeling for where you're at. I've seen some of you have done it and gone through it. John spent some time on it. Do you have a newfound respect for where your business is at and kind of,
No, it's
eye-opening, right?
It's very helpful because
you don't know. You're just like, you feel, you get those changes of feeling from day to day in your business. If you're not tracking it, every day can change. You can feel great about your business one day and the next day you're like, oh no, my business is going down.
Yeah.
So,
it puts it all in perspective.
Yeah.
Like you said, I have 4 closings this month. Nothing lined up for the following. So.
Right. And when you do your pipeline also, knowing that you have those 4 closings, we can work with you to help you decide where do you go from here.
Right.
Is it time to, if you looked at just those 4 closings and said, this is all I got, then you'd be probably pretty nervous to up your commitment,
right.
to your advertising. But if you can look at it and say, I got these 4 closings, but I also have this stuff that's active and this stuff that's prospective, you can say, all right, well, I'm not businessless after 4 deals. I've got
Right.
more business coming in, so maybe I won't go super aggressive with my bump in advertising, but I'm going to take a bump in advertising. That's where it'll help you make those decisions.
How do you define active?
Active is anybody you're actually
Just
taking out.
talking with?
No. Talking is prospective.
Okay.
If you haven't met with them, you're not. If you met with them for a buyer consultation, I'll consider that to be active. If you've taken them out to see houses at least once, I'd call that active. Sometimes taking people out to see houses leads to nothing else for a month or 2, and you might be moving them back to prospective. Because who knows? Maybe it's a lack of inventory. Maybe they didn't jive well with you. You can't really sometimes pinpoint that, and sometimes people they won't tell you, hey, I really didn't jive with you. They're just gonna ignore you.
Like you?
Yeah, I didn't really like you, so I'm not gonna go out and see any houses with you. you just won't hear from them again. So if if they go from that active, they can go from active to prospective, and from prospective to active. They could go from under agreement back down to prospective. They move around, but active is somebody you've met with that you've got a pretty good feeling like you've got a 1 in 5 shot of closing them out. And that over time, you'll get a feeling for that. If prospective would be people you've had a conversation with. Could be someone you met face to face in a coffee shop, but you haven't been out to their house yet. You haven't shown them any houses yet. Those are still prospective.
More like people that are in your drip campaigns and that kind of stuff. Like just that might take us 3 months or 6 months or whatever. Those are perspectives.
Yeah, perspective would be like a prime perspective would be you get a lead or a referral, someone on the phone. They're like, yeah, no, we're thinking about buying the next 6 to 12 months. Sure, yeah, set me up on your listing alerts.
Right. You put it in MLS and-
Okay, great. I'll keep an eye on what you're looking for. But we're not really ready to go out and look at houses yet.
Right.
That would be a perspective.
Yeah.
Probably even a listing could go in perspective too for someone that's just kind of like, yeah, we're thinking about selling. We went on your home value report. We're just not ready to meet with anybody yet. We're not sure if we want to sell. We're not sure where we go yet. That would probably be perspective too.
Mm-hmm.
You'll kind of get a feel for it. Especially if you say, all right, do I feel like I have a 10% chance of closing them, a 20% chance of closing them out? That would also help you decide who goes where. At the end of the day, it's not going to 20% or 10%.
It's just a gauge.
It isn't going to
Right.
make a huge difference, because if they're in there, hopefully you're working them. And that if you're looking at every day and saying, all right, who's in here? How can I add new people to this prospective list? How can I move people from prospective to active to under agreement to close? That's the goal. That's the goal, is every day be working that so that you can move people along in the process. So that's enough for today. I'm going to stop the recording, but I did want to continue if anybody wants to take a few minutes just to talk about, so some of you will be starting to capture leads and you're going to wonder what to say. So did want to take a few minutes